सारे जहाँ से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा हमारा सारे जहाँ से अच्छा.
Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host. This is a special conversation. Today we are going to celebrate the 75th anniversary of India's freedom and independence. India has been free and independent of foreign and colonial occupation for 75 years. Indeed, it is a moment to celebrate. I plan to discuss with you 5 of India's greatest achievements in the past 75 years. I will also discuss 3 of India's major failures. This is a moment of celebration, so there will be more celebrations and less criticism. There are many questions that we all need to ask about India, but we will leave them for another day. But before we venture into the discussion of India's achievements and its failures in the past 75 years, can you please subscribe to Khanversations, like the video, ring the bell icon, and please share this video with your friends, your colleagues, your students if you are a professor, and if you have connections in the media, with them too. This is an important story, and we need to tell the story of India 75 years after decolonization. So, achievement number 1. India was born a democracy and has remained a democracy consistently so, except for those 2 years in 1975 to 1977 when Prime Minister Gandhi essentially imposed an emergency period and essentially eliminated all political freedoms in the country. Except for those 2 years, India has more or less survived as a quality democracy for 3/4 of a century. This is indeed an achievement for a country that was so poor, for a country that was devastated by colonization, for a country that had just been divided and had experienced some of the worst riots in the history of humanity, which led to the deaths of 2 million people. For that country to exist as a democracy, continue to survive as a democracy for 3/4 of a century is indeed a remarkable achievement, and all Indians need to be proud of this, but not only proud of it, but also invested in it and recognize that this is one of the greatest national assets that we have, and we must try our best to ensure that we do not lose this extremely important quality of India, which is that it is a democracy, in fact, to a great extent, a liberal democracy. Indeed, in the past few years, its ranking as a democracy has declined, and there are issues with freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, which have questioned the robustness of Indian democracy. But let me tell you, if you look at India in the region, South Asia, for example, it is indeed the best democracy. If you look at post-colonial societies, India is indeed one of the better democracies. So in spite of the recent dip, it is fair to say that India is a strong, robust democracy, a constitutional democracy where people respect the constitution and actually like living in a democracy. So achievement number 1, India was born a democracy and has remained so for 75 continuous years, and we pray that it remains so in the future too. I am a student of international relations, a professor who teaches world politics and foreign affairs and national security. And so for me, the second great achievement of India is its ability and capacity to develop and deploy nuclear deterrence. For some, this achievement may be controversial, but I have no doubt that this is one of India's greatest achievements in the past 75 years, that it has become a nuclear power. If you look at Russia's invasion of Ukraine, if you look at China's threats to Taiwan, you would recognize that if either of those 2 countries, Ukraine or Taiwan, were nuclear, we would not have this problem today. So nuclear weapons, while they are not useful in war, really, they cannot be deployed, but they are often the best deterrence against foreign invasion. So I think India, by achieving nuclear deterrence, has indeed achieved something quite remarkable. Congratulations for those who took those decisions of testing those nuclear weapons and letting the world know that India is a nuclear power, and nothing makes India more safer other than perhaps the Himalayas, its nuclear arsenal. So the tests in 1974, 1998, while they may have brought in some international sanctions and criticism, have indeed made India very safe. India is now considered as one of the world's major powers. You cannot be a major power in this world without having the nuclear option. So achievement number 2, India becoming a nuclear power. Before I talk about the third great achievement of India and also its first major failure, please subscribe to Khanversations if you have not already done so. So before I go to the next achievement, I want to talk about one of India's greatest failures. I think India's greatest failure, especially in the past 2 decades, since 1992, so that's probably 3 decades, is the deteriorating relations between Hindus and Muslims. Things are getting worse and worse and worse. Today we talk about bulldozer politics. Today we talk about disenfranchisement of Muslims. Today we talk about Muslims as a national security threat. And all of these things have derailed the progress that Muslims have made in India in the past few decades. And let me tell you that no country can continue to progress if it is at war with one of its own. So India cannot become a great power. India cannot gain international respect. India cannot become a stable and prosperous democracy if it is going to systematically violate the rights of a significant minority of its own population. So I think this is one of India's greatest failures, and for this I don't just blame the Indian government or some political parties. I think everybody is responsible, and I beseech everybody in India to genuinely take this deterioration of Hindu-Muslim relations in India very seriously and try to do whatever you can to first arrest the decline of this interfaith relations, and second, try your best to improve Hindu-Muslim relations. And India that has strong interfaith solidarity at home will be seen as a major power from outside. So if India needs to project power, gain international respect, and advance India's international interests overseas, it has to be strong, stable, democratic, secular, and pluralistic at home. But if it becomes a society which is oppressing its own people, then it will lose international respect, as we saw in 2019 and 20 when Indian government changed the constitution and imposed a severe lockdown on Kashmir, and the protests that soon followed after passage of the Citizenship Amendment Act. So I think one of India's biggest failures is the polarization of its domestic society, and this will definitely weaken the country. Imagine a chariot which is pulled by horses in opposite directions, and that is what is happening to India, or beginning to happen to India. And I hope that everybody recognizes this. And so inshallah 25 years from now, when I do the centennial celebration conversation, the first and the most important achievement I want to talk about is the remarkable improvement of Hindu-Muslim relations in India. What is achievement number 3? In my view, India's tremendous economic development, infrastructure development, and explosion of its products, of its services, and its economy since 1991, when liberalization began. So in the past 30 years, India has grown at a phenomenal rate. In the last 20 years alone, India has increased its per capita GDP by nearly 10 times. And that is a remarkable achievement for a country of this size, where a significant amount of population was mired in poverty, deep poverty. The fact that India has lifted in just 10 years 271 million people out of poverty is indeed a remarkable achievement. From the year 2006 to the year 2060, the years for which data is available, India lifted 271 people out of poverty into middle class existence. That is remarkable. This has led to explosion of innovation, both in technology, sciences, in entrepreneurship. It has lifted the quality of life. You can see that in India's sporting performances, how well India is doing all over the world. You can also see in India's growing scientific achievements. So I think one of the greatest achievements of India in the last 75 years has been its economic development. Indeed, India is now the fourth or the fifth biggest economy in the world. Its total GDP is about $3 trillion, $3 trillion and 50 for the year 2021. And if you make adjustment for purchasing power, then India is the biggest economy after the US and China. So in that sense, this is indeed remarkable, and congratulations to all of the policymakers, the politicians who took the decisions necessary to move India into this positive direction. And it is important that economic development be sustained, because without economic development, it is very difficult to preserve political freedoms and also improve social conditions in the country. What is India's second failure? I think India's second failure is its failure to resolve its issues with Pakistan. India is more or less safe. Geopolitically speaking, it has mountains, the highest mountains in the world in the north. It has oceans in the south. So India is like a fortress in many ways, but yet it is at odds with two of its neighbors who are both nuclear powers, China and Pakistan, and we have fought wars, 4 with Pakistan and 1 with China. I think India's failure to resolve its ongoing issues with Pakistan, whether it is trans-border, cross-border terrorism, whether it is support for insurgency in Kashmir, or whether it is constant international bickering over issues, this has proven to be detrimental and slowed India's progress towards that ultimate seat at the international table that India desires. India wants to be recognized as a major power in the world. India wants to be influential. India wants to be Vishwaguru, as some people say. India cannot become that if it is unable to be the leader in its own region. India will not be a global power if it is not hegemonic in South Asia. Its neighbors must be at peace with it, and its neighbors must look up to it as their leader in moments of crisis, whether it is security related, pandemic related, economic, or climate related. India will have to lead in all these issues at home and in the region. India needs to develop its own concept of near abroad and essentially look at its neighboring countries as its own wards that it needs to take care of. And until India achieves that status in South Asia, it will not be recognized as a major power worldwide, and it will continue to need support and help from other powers like Russia and the United States to continue to maintain its technological advantage and military advantage against its neighbors. So I think India's second failure has been its inability in 75 years to resolve its disputes with Pakistan militarily or diplomatically. Before I talk about India's achievement number 4, make sure that you subscribe to Khanversations if you have not already done so. So what is achievement number 4? In my view, India today has become a land of experts. This, I think, is a remarkable achievement, going back to the days when India was poor, but it was fortunate to have founding fathers who were all profoundly educated, lawyers, capable of writing books, thinking of philosophical matters, political matters, and having the capacity to have long-term visions and also provide moral guidance to the world, not just to India alone. Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Nehru, Maulana Azad, these are just a few examples of leaders who were also scholars and philosophers themselves. So India started as a land led by intellectuals, and today it has become a land that exports scholars, engineers, doctors, managers, technicians abroad. Look at the world today. All the major IT firms are led by people of either from India or of Indian origin. So India has become a land of experts. That clearly shows India's commitment to the pursuit of knowledge. Whether you're talking of IIMs or IITs or thousands of engineering and medical colleges, India is indeed focused on producing a knowledge-based nation. India's third major failure is a more recent development. If you were to visit India in the 1970s and 1960s, it was a vibrant culture, very colorful, multi-religious, multicultural, but it was also a very poor country. And since 1990s, since liberalization took place, it has become a vibrant economy. But in the past few years, especially since 2011, there is a new development in the Indian economy, a widening gap between the rich and the poor. The top 10% of the Indian population now owns nearly 60% of the annual income. They own a huge segment of the national wealth, and the bottom 50%, which is half of the country, own maybe less than 15% of the national wealth and income. According to organizations which study income inequality and wealth inequality, India is in a severe case of growing inequality. This growing inequality between the rich and the poor suggests that the balance of government intervention in the economy and the free market has been lost. Growing inequalities are the sources of social troubles. It is very important that India ensure that the success of India, the growth of Indian economy, the new wealth that is being generated in India through its innovation, through its knowledge, through its trade, is equally shared all over the population. I'm not recommending that India become a socialist country where we ensure that everybody has the same thing regardless of how much they put in. That's not the point. What I'm trying to suggest is that if you look at the graphs, this huge gap between those who have and those who do not have is going to be definitely destabilizing, and it will exacerbate other fault lines. So for example, right now upper caste Hindus in India own 41% of the wealth, whereas 12% of the Indian population, which is Muslim, owns less than 8% of the economy. So you can see that the income and wealth gap between the two communities can also become a source of widening and making the conflict, widening the social gap, exacerbating political issues, and also making it difficult to improve and promote social cohesion. So I think this is going to be one of India's biggest challenges, that India has to somehow find a way to ensure that more and more people benefit from the growing Indian economy. We cannot have two Indias, one that is extremely rich and one that is profoundly poor. Finally, number 5, India's 5th greatest achievement in the past 75 years. I think the fact that India remains a land of diversity and still is territorially unified 75 years later is a remarkable achievement. We can see in the region alone, Pakistan has become two Pakistans, partly because of the geography, but also because the disparity between ethnic groups that composed Pakistan. The fact that India, which has so many different ethnicities, so many different languages, so many different religious communities, so much diversity, even in outlook, in way of life, and the fact that it still remains a strong integrated union, even though on its borders it has had movements that sought to secede from the union. Nevertheless, India remains intact, and I think that is a tremendous achievement, and I pray that it remains so in the near and the long-term future. So this is an important achievement of India too. So ladies and gentlemen, I have shared with you 5 of India's greatest achievements. Number 1, the fact that it has sustained and nurtured its democracy. Number 2, that it has developed capacity to defend itself, including nuclear capabilities. Number 3, it has lifted a huge segment of India, a huge segment of humanity from poverty into wealth. The size of probably Indonesia. That many poor people have become middle class in India since in this century. Number 4, the fact that India is producing so many experts and exporting them worldwide is one major achievement. And finally, India's achievement of remaining integrated and unified. Among its failures that I have identified is the growing Hindu-Muslim divide in the country. I also feel that India's tensions which remain with Pakistan, which deplete the resources of both nations, and also essentially radicalize and exacerbate domestic politics. So it's very important that India resolve its issues with Pakistan. And number three, India's major failure is its inability to share the new wealth that India is generating with all people. Yes, I understand that there are affirmative action policies and positive discrimination in the system, but nevertheless, India should be at least alert of this growing divide and inequality in the country. If you have liked the video, please share it with your friends. Leave your comments behind. I'm very interested in knowing what you think are the advantages and disadvantages that India has provided to its citizens in the last 75 years. And until next time, think of Khanversations as a resource which you can go to and share with your students, with your friends, with your colleagues. Thank you very much for watching.
सारे जहाँ से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा हमारा सारे जहाँ से अच्छा।